All right, guys. So let's get started with the AAA and let's wrap up the AAA completely. So the topic is AAA we are going to discuss. And when we are discussing this AAA, guys, so we all know that it stands for authentication. The second A stands for authorization. And the last A stands for accounting. Now, if you will be asking me the meanings of authentication, authorization, and accounting, so we can take just some simple scenarios. Like, for example, if we are talking about the authentication part, what is authentication? So, authentication is like we all know, it's nothing but it refers to the verification of users. Like, it is something the verification of users. So once it's done, like verification of users, just let me write down, then I will explain you with the scenario. Then we have the authorization. Authorization refers to something like we can say, like once you are authenticated and like you are an authorized user, so like what type of resources you are allowed to use, what resources you are allowed to use, allowed or we can say not allowed to use. Then lastly, we do have is your accounting. Accounting is nothing but keeping the track, like to keep the logs. These L2 can monitor and they can even troubleshoot. Like they have the access for some few commands. When it comes to layer 3, they have full access to the device. Now let's try to see like guys, what is authentication, authorization and accounting. Before this example, let's try to understand like the teachable platform. Like you guys go and watch your recordings, right? So whenever you are watching your recordings on the teachable, once you click on the link to open the teachable, it is going to ask you for the login ID and password. So if you do have the login ID and password, then only you are an authorized user to access that. If you don't have the login ID password, let's say we change your ID password, that means like you won't be able to get the access. That means the authentication process is not completed over there. Like you are not an authorized user to get the access of this particular web page. Now, let's say that you got somehow access to the teachable platform by giving your login ID and password. Once you have got the access, so you are an authorized user now. So when it comes to the authorization, like in your teachable, you will see that only the access of your recordings, which like you have paid for CCNA, CCNP, or whatever the courses are there. So only those recordings are there which you have the access to. But apart from that, there are some free recordings as well, which like PyNet Labs have uploaded for you. But some paid trainings also are there when you will go through with the teachable platform, right? So like you are not able to access the like for example DevNet trainings like because they are paid. So like you are not allowed to use that resources for your personal use. You are only allowed for some limited content which is there. So like whatever you are allowed to use. So that is what comes in the category of authorization. Authorization will let you know like which resource you are going to use and like are you allowed to use that particular resource or not.
If you enjoyed the content of the video, don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe to our channel.
And when it comes to the accounting part, accounting is something we can say like for example that if you are going through with your CCNA recordings, like everyone has almost completed their CCNA trainings. So you have also watched through like all the recordings of CCNA. So like that there shows a bar like how much track you have completed like 70%, 100%. So that is something we can say the accounting to keep the logs that how much the user has like used the data or like how much it has gone through with the recordings. So in the same way in accounting like we do have to keep the logs of the devices and networking as well. So now as I was saying that AAA is used for network access as well as it is used for network administration. So let's say that there are three users, level 1, level 2, level 3. So these users will be somewhat like acting as like, we can say some employees of your organization who are responsible for managing some task. And this is the part which I will show you in the authorization, like by giving some commands over the devices, like this user is able to do this part. So when it comes to guys AAA, so let's try to understand the first A, which is your authentication. Authentication, if I'm talking about the authentication part, guys, it provides you identity. Provides you identity, identity in the sense like you do have your usernames or you can have your passwords. So this is a kind of identity which your authentication is going to provide. And like users of the machines get authenticate with the identity either for device access or for your device administration. Like, you have to take the access via telnet. Then if you have configured some AAA, then they are going to ask you for the username and password as well. So this is what refers to your authentication. Then second we have is your authorization. So when we describe the authorization term, so authorization is something like, we can use the resources what user can access. Resources what the user can access. Like if I'll take the example of real production environments here, like for example, if you are taking the device access. So in the device access, guys, you are allowed to use like, privilege commands. The privilege commands are there, like, all the show commands and troubleshooting is there. So let's say you are restricted to erase the configurations, that you are not allowed to erase the configs. You can only use the command show running config, show startup config, but you are not allowed to erase the configuration. So this is what device access refers to, like just some privilege command access. But when it comes to device administration, so in the device administration, we do have some ACL configurations, like if you have configured some VLANs, like every configurations we can say like here, the user has the full access to the network device. Then lastly, we do have is your accounting. So accounting is something which gives you the logs, what you have done. It gives you the logs, what you have done. Or we can say like it is also used for accessing and administration of the devices. So this is some like just an overview and introduction to your AAA, guys. Then coming to the next point, which is like we do have some AAA components. So these are not really asked, but you must be having some knowledge if anybody is going to ask you what are AAA components. So in AAA, the first component we have is like supplicant. So supplicant is nothing but this is the term which is used for all the end devices. End devices, you all know, like it is used to take the device access. Like here you can say, we can say laptop, PC, printer, servers, tab, whatever, like these are used as end devices and these are considered as supplicant in the AAA components. Then we have authenticator. So this authenticator is something we can say like the devices here are switches, wireless access points, and WLCs. So these are some devices like, which are a part of your authenticator. But one more thing to note here, guys, about these authenticators, that this simply forwards the credentials. These devices simply forwards the credential to the authentication server. Now, authentication server is also there, the third component, which we will explain you now. So we have authentication server. So what is this authentication server, guys? Like whenever we are talking about this authentication server, so this is nothing but it validates the identity of the client. Validates the identity of the client. And AAA configurations are always done on the authenticator servers. So this is some components which you need to like understand. Like these are some, we can say terminologies which are used for AAA. Then coming to the AAA protocols, guys. We have two types of AAA protocols. So whenever we are talking about the AAA protocols, like, we can say that there are two types of AAA protocols, which we will usually see in the production environments. Like we can say, we do have some, we can add the term. The first one we can say is you have usually heard of this term, like which is used as radius server. So when it comes to the radius, guys, so let's have some points about the radius. So this is like commonly used for network access. Commonly used for network access. Either it's a wired network or it's a wireless network. Or we can say like it uses some port numbers. Uses a port number, like the port number it is going to use is 1812, and this is a UDP port for authentication. Also, it is going to use the port number 1813, also a UDP port for accounting. So this is what you all need to know about the Radius server. These are some protocols which are being used. Now coming to the most important point here, which is your TACACS server. So this TACACS server, like when we are discussing this TACACS server, this is a Cisco proprietary. So this is a Cisco proprietary protocol and it uses port number 49. So this port number 49 is a TCP port for communication between client and server. Communication between the client and server. And also guys, it is used for taking the access of the device via administratively, or like you can say that it is also responsible to take the device access using some, like telnet and all the configurations which we do. So now in order to do AAA, we need some external servers, like we call these servers as ACS, which are access control systems. So this is something a separate hardware which is dedicated for the configurations of AAA, and it also supports both of the protocols, TACACS and Radius, and it can be used for both of the configurations. Either you are taking the access of the device and you are taking the administration of the device. So when you will see like the AAA authentication parts, guys, the authentication can be done in two ways. So just let me try the first one, and like we will have some labs here as well. AAA authentication. And this authentication I will be telling you right now is something like you can say that the types of authentications are there. Like we have two types of authentication. The first we have is the login authentication. So login is something we can say it allows you to access your user mode. Allows you to access the user mode. Then the second we do have is the enable. Enable is something which it allows you to access the enable and privilege. Allows you to access the privilege mode. So these are two types of authentication, guys. But when we will see the authentication practically, so the first type of authentication is something the local database. Like in this kind of authentication, like here the local database, like the username and password are stored locally on the device. Like we can store all these on the routers, and the routers authenticates the database of usernames and passwords. So let's see one lab scenario here for this authentication part. Just let me open my packet tracer. Okay, so we'll take two routers, or we can take one as well, like that would be enough. So let's connect two devices here, and we will go and configure one switch here. So this is my guys scenario as of now here, which we are going to do the labs. So now on this like router one, we are going to use some we can say some IP address. Let's say we are gonna use some 192.168.1.100 as my gateway on this particular interface. So let's go and configure the IP. So this is something the local authentication which I'm showing you. Interface gig 00. IP address we have is like 192.168.1.100 255.255.0 and no shutdown. Now guys, see whenever we are going to configure the AAA model, so like the command syntax goes like, let's say we have two PCs, let's write the IP address here as well, 192.168.1.1, 192.168.1.1, and 192.168.1.100. And here we do have 192.168.1.2, 192.168.1.100. Now we'll do some AAA configurations here. So the first command will write AAA new model. So once we have executed the AAA, then we need to define one username here. So let's say the username I'm giving as admin, and the password to this admin I'm giving as admin. So admin is my username and the password. Now I will go with AAA authentication. So once we are applying the AAA authentication, we need to run the login command, and then see, there are two options, guys. Like either you can use a list of authentication where like all the user list will be stored, but you can also go with the default configuration. So let's go with the list first. So let's say I'm going to write CCIE as my list name, and I'm going to use it locally. So once we have created the list of authentication, now we are going to run some commands. Like let's say we'll run some line VTY04. And I'm going to write login authentication, and the list name is CCIE. And once we have done exit, now we'll try to take the access from this particular device using telnet. So let's say telnet 192.168.1.100. So you got the username, it was admin, and the password was admin. So we got the access here, like enable if I will write, so enable password was not set. So this is just a quick basic understanding and just a lab scenario to see like how like these things work. So this is something like the normal authentication where all the database is stored over on the router, right? But let's say, for example, if you have some other kind of scenarios, like if you are using, let's say, try to delete, we can reload this. So let's say I'm reloading the device. No, I don't want to save the configurations. So if I'm going to use some AAA authentication using some TACACS server, guys, right? So in that TACACS server, what usually happens, like whatever the database which we are going to store on the router is not stored, inside the router. It will stored on a separate dedicated hardware, which is either your TACACS server or Radius server. So let's do the configurations, configure terminal, and let's change the host name. So let's change the host name to let's say PYNET PyNet, and this is the PyNet host router. So we'll configure some interface gig 0/0. IP address will write 192.168.1.100 and default subnet value, no shutdown. Exit. Once we have done this configurations, now I'm going to take one server here. So this is my server. I'm going to connect this server to the switch. Now you can see, guys, I have connected the server. We'll assign some IP to the server as well. So let's say 192.168.1.10 is the server IP, 192.168.1.100 is my gateway. So now we need to check the reachability from the server that the packet is going to the router or not. So we'll try 192.168.1.100. We are getting the replies, means there is reachability. Also, we can try here ping 192.168.1.10. So got the 100% success rate as like the reachability is there. Now see, guys, we will do some AAA basic configurations here. So we will write AAA new model. So once we have defined the model, then we need to define the TACACS server which we are using. So TACACS server, and then you need to define the host. So what is the host here? So we have used 192.168.1.10 as your TACACS server IP. So as you have applied this, then after applying the TACACS server host to the device, you need to define one key. So let's say I'm writing Cisco as my key for the TACACS server. So now as you can see, we have done the configurations. Now I'm going to create some users here. So let's say username, I'm going to create one admin, and user password for, sorry, username, the admin is the username, and like the password will be, so let's say for this admin, the password will be admin123. So this is the password for username admin, and like admin123 is the password. Now why I have applied this, I will let you know later on. But apart from that, let's just do something else. We will do some AAA authentication here. So let's write AAA authentication, and we will write login. We will create a list of authentication, and then we will create a group here, because right now we don't want to store all the configurations locally on the router. So we need to go with the group, and where we will be creating the group on the TACACS server, like TACACS server will use the local configurations. Now this is done. You need to configure some line VTY, and let's say 0 to 4 you have selected, and then you will write login authentication CCIE. Once this is done, now you will write exit here. So now we are going to be on the TACACS server. Now here on the TACACS server, if you will go in the services, you will find that AAA is there. So you need to on the TACACS server. You need to select the TACACS server here. Now the client name, what is your client name? Let's say PYNET is the client name. So we will write PYNET, PyNet is the client name. Client IP is 192.168.1.100. This is the IP of your client. And the secret password which you applied for your TACACS server was the key to TACACS server was Cisco. So I have applied that key as well. Now this is a TACACS server. You are going to add this TACACS server here. Like as it's added, now you are going to add some users. Let's say I'm going to use user one. The password is user one. This is one user. User 2 we have, and we will see user 2. We have added two users in the TACACS server. Now let's try to take the access of these two users which we have created through the PC via the TACACS server. So we'll go here, we will write telnet 192.168.1.100, username user1, and the password is user1. So you can see, like I got the access of the user1, but that user1 which we have created here was not on my router, which we have created on the TACACS server. So like this is how externally we can use and create these users. So let's write exit because we will not be able to run the command because here I have not enabled the enable password or enable secret. Let's say that enable secret is Dinesh. Now we will take the access. Let's say user2. User2 is the password. We will write enable and the enable password is Dinesh. So now we got the access to the router. So this is how the configurations of TACACS server and this is how the users needs to be created on the TACACS server, guys. So this is as of now for your TACACS server. Now any doubt you guys have in the TACACS server, so guys please just let me know your doubts now.
Sir, what is the list of authentication?
List of authentication refers to the list of the users which we are creating. Like for example, we are writing the line VTY04, which means like we are allowing the access to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 users will be there technically. So that list will be stored in that particular database. So that is like the list we create. Or if you will go with the default configuration, like I shown you there, like,
Yes, previously in router you shown that.
yes.
default
So
one.
if you will go with the list of the configurations now, like if you will go use the default one, then you don't need to write the line VTY lines and all that part. So that would be default stored on that device and then directly you can use as well.
That name you given CCIE. This is the means user name you have given in router.
That CCIE was the name of the list which I have given. Like you need to define a list name to that list of authentication. So that was the name of that list, not the username. Username was admin. But here also you guys will see that when I was creating the username, I created username admin and password admin here, right? As well as like here, see, I have created one list of authentication again here. Why do we need, why I needed this list here? Like if everything is on my TACACS server. So this is something we can say for redundancy and for backup. Let's say if your all the users, like your company has a dedicated TACACS server for these kind of scenarios, and like you have user 1, 2 who are accessing the devices accordingly. So, but let's say if anyhow this TACACS server failed, let's remove the link. Let's say this TACACS server failed. Now, if any user wants to take the access, then in that case, now you can take the access with that admin. So I guess it was admin123. Let me check what was the password.
Admin 1230.
Admin123. So we got the access here. Enable password was Dinesh. So you can now see admin and via the admin password we got the access to the router. So this is like, whenever you are doing these kind of configurations in the production environments, so you need to define one username for your device itself locally. Like, if in case your TACACS server fails, then these things can happen. So you should not end in the like, dead out or like the kind of dead out policies and lockout policies. So for just a backup purpose, we need to create one a username which is admin and like, the password to that admin as well. So one more thing is there which I'll explain you in the authorization part. So as of now, this is for your authentication part, guys.
Sir, can you clarify once again, please? List and the username. I'm not.
See, username is the name of the users which are taking the access, and list is something, the list where all these users are stored.
Okay.
Like for example, here on the TACACS server, if you will go, so in the TACACS server AAA configurations, you will find there is a list here. See, username, user setup is there, right? So all the users are in this user setup, but in the routers, we don't have user setups, right? So we create a list for like the number of users which we are going to create there. So you can name any, like you can give any name to that particular, list. It's not that but mandatory that you are going with a specific CCI, or you can go with any other name as well.
List means we the person which we want to authorize.
Yes, the persons who are going to take the access will be stored in that particular list. Like for example, you, me, Dinesh, like we four are working in a production environment and like company wants to give us the access of the devices according to the privileges. Let's say you got the full access. You, me, like access is a different thing, but let's say that all the 4 users are there. So company will create a list of all the users, like a kind of department. We can say that these are the users who will be stored in this list. So they can access the devices using these kind of configurations.
So, is there any limit, sir? How many users or list we can create?
No,
In
as
this,
such, there is no limit. Like for telnet configurations, there are some limitations. I guess it's up to 14 or 16, I guess. But as such, like for the list, there is no like list का कोई वो नहीं है कि like there will be any kind of limitation for the list. You can create as many as list you want to, but it's recommended to go with one. Otherwise, there might be like scenarios with different kind of things can happen.
okay, sir. That TACACS and TACACS plus both are same or some difference is there?
No, both are same. Like it's already known as TACACS plus. It's a Cisco proprietary protocol. Same.
Okay, and for other devices we use radius.
Yes, we use radius for other devices.
Okay, both are same, sir. Is there any some difference in radius and TACACS plus?
Like as such, like both work functionally fine, but widely used is the TACACS plus because TACACS uses some, we can say Radius server is going to use some UDP ports for authorization and separate UDP ports for authentic like accounting, but this is not going to use it's a client server model, so it will use some TCP port 49 for client server communication. So widely many organizations also recommend this Radius servers, sorry, this TACACS server only.
Okay, does it mean that if we have a Dell or HP device, we will not be able to use TACACS plus? We have to use that radius one only.
Yes, right.
Okay, one word you have mentioned that WLC, it's a wildcard.
No, WLC is wireless LAN controller, Dinesh.
Okay, wireless LAN.
Yes, and WAP is wireless access point.
Fine, sir.
So guys, now we'll see some authorization part. So for that, I need to share some of my EVNG machine. But guys, see like the lab which I will be doing. So I'll show you in 2 ways. So you can try in your machines. I will help you out by checking out the adapters IP of your EVNG machine. So because that would be pretty much pathetic for you all to do because everyone will be having different IPs. So I'll show you in my screen and I'll also let you know how you are going to do the configurations. But before doing the configurations for authorization part, we need to understand the authorization part, what exactly that authorization part is and how we clarify the authorization. So let's say if I'm talking about the authorization. So whenever we are defining the authorization part, this authorization is something like it restricts the users to execute specific commands after successful authentication. Specific commands after successful authentication. Now, guys, see, I have also done this lab today all as well. But see, guys, I'll recommend you all that, like, whenever we are talking about the authorization, you must have a good knowledge on like which command is gonna work on which particular mode. So for example, let's say that we have how many modes in the devices Cisco iOS. We have, let's say, we can say the first is your user mode. The second we have is the privilege mode. The third was is the configuration, which is global config. We do have the interface mode and we have some like if we are doing some routing informations like if we are doing some routing protocol, so we do have one more mode which is config router, right? Whenever we are writing the commands like router EIGRP, then we move to this router config router mode, right? So these are some few modes in the devices which we usually see, right guys? So
Sir,
yes, Ankit.
sir, yesterday what was be missing on AAA lab?
Yesterday in AAA, I guess there was some command mistake which we did. So that is why like today I'm going through with the concept again. And this authorization though, like we haven't done, right? Like Manish and Priyank. So Abhi, guys, if I will ask that just a random question, like anybody can answer who knows the answer. If I will be asking you that if I want to run the command show IP interface brief, so where I am allowed to run the command? On config mode or privilege, like on which mode we will run that command?
Privilege mode.
Privilege mode, right? If I want to shut down any interface, where I will go?
And interface
Global,
mode.
so global
On this,
configuration.
yes, first we will go here and then we'll go here, right? So these two modes are mandatory to shut down the interface, configuration and interface mode, right? So
Yes,
guys, see, like we have we have some iOS privilege levels like which are used to control and give the access of the commands to the users in the production environments. So if I'm talking about the iOS privilege levels, let me write down the next page. So if we are talking about this iOS privilege levels, guys, like there are it always starts from 1 to 15. Like 0 is also there, but I am not getting that name of the mode which comes, is I guess the setup mode where the configuration where the NV ramp is blank. So there is something like which is mentioned as 0. So let me write down here about these privilege levels which are from 1 to 15, guys. So there are some default levels which you need to understand. So let's say that, for example, the first one mode we have is the user execution mode. So user mode is something which refers to this sign. This arrow sign is represented by the arrow. So here when you will see the privilege level, it is always 1. Privilege 1 means like you are not allowed to do anything, but some basic monitoring you are allowed to do. So because why we have the privilege level, like when you will verify this user mode and like when you will run the command on the user mode, see, this is my access here, or let's go in the switch only, router, sorry. So this is the console screen. Guys, my screen is visible to everyone.
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in this user mode, right now I'm on the user mode, guys. So if I'm gonna run the command here, show privilege, if it is going to accept or not, let's see. Yes. So when I run the command show privilege, so it will always show you the current privilege level is 1 here, because if you will put question mark, like there are not more commands here, some basic commands are there, see. So these are some basic sets of commands which when you are going to run like use these commands like show, you have to run the command like unable to be in the privilege mode. So here like the privilege 1 defines that you don't have much access of the device, but some basic monitoring access is there. So just let's take one screenshot of this and let's paste it over the PowerPoint slide for the notes purpose. Here we can paste this whenever we run this command on the user mode. So it will always show you that the privilege level is 0. So now whenever we are talking about the default privileges, I told you 1 to 15 are there, but let's say what is the second one. So if you are going to configure the any device, after user mode, we have the privilege mode. Privilege refers to this hash sign. And when you will run the command in the hash sign, you will see that privilege level is always set to 15. See, why do we have the 15 privilege level here? So if I'm gonna run the command enable and enable password was Dinesh. If I'll run the command show privilege, so you guys can see now that the privilege level it is showing to me is 15. So this 15 means like I got the full access to the device. 15 is the last level. Like by default, there are 1 to 15 levels of iOS privilege models, like we can say. So these default privileges are from 1 to 15. We can say this one is always reserved for like the privilege 1. Like the privilege 1 is reserved for the user mode and privilege 15 is reserved for the this privilege mode here. But apart from that, we also have, let's say, 2 to 14 privileges, right? Now, if you will be asking me like what is the use of these privileges then? So we can say these are the customized privileges. These are customized and like they can be, used for like let me write here, can be used for specific users with specific commands. So these are some customized privilege modes which your devices are gonna use in the production environments, or these are reserved for the users, which like the number of users we are going to create on the devices. So if you will see guys here, like I'll show you one quick lab of these customized iOS privilege levels. So I guess the first and second is clear to everyone. The first one and the 15th one, the privilege level. Or any
Yes.
doubt you guys have, so please let me know. Meanwhile, I'm starting my devices.
Means 2 to 14 any command we can any command permission we can give to any user. There is no limitation of commands.
Just a second, Dinesh. I didn't get that. Just was reading some message on the Teams chat. Yes, Priyank will record that video in your group, like in your class as well. Don't worry. Yes, Dinesh, like get back on your query, please.
That modes are 2 to 14.
Mm-hmm.
That if we take a user privilege mode 2, then any command we can permit to that particular user. Or is there
Yes.
any limitation of in
No,
respective user 2, 3, 4, 2 to 14?
no. In 2 to 14, there is as such no limitations because that is something. See, I was just performing one lab. Okay, no issues. I'll give you one more lab scenario. So let's delete this lab and I'll also create this lab for my reference. So let's say we are gonna give AAA iOS privilege levels. So here is my lab screen, guys. And see, guys, I'm gonna take one cloud here. So you cannot take this because like you will be having some scenarios with this part, but I'll explain you what you can do is. Now I'm going to take two routers and the RAM I'm gonna give here is 512 MB and then save. We have this VIOS1 here and this VIOS2. So I'm going to connect all these devices together. And this is something the cloud, like the network adapter, which I have taken here. So this network adapter will help me to with this router, I am going to take the access of this router via my base machine via using this putty. So that's just why I have connected that network adapter. So I'll like also help you out guys how you are going to do that in your kind of scenarios. So like guys, whenever we are going to perform the we can say these kind of scenarios for the authorization part. So we need to have some things clear in our mind that like the first question which like Ganesh was saying that whenever we are doing these configurations that these customized levels are for like every users or not. So we'll just write the IP first and then I'll explain you 1.1.1 is the IP which I'm going to use on this interface of this router, and on the other side I'm going to use 1.1.2. And here guys see like my network adapter is having some IP of 10.255.1.51. So excluding the 51 I can take any IP. So let's say I'm going to take 51 or like we can take 10. So here it's slash 24 as it's a subnetted network. So like guys, this is a different scenario. We will not focus more on this. This is something like for testing purpose I have added. So now we are going to turn all the devices on. Now my devices are started. SVIOS1, 2. No need to do with the cloud. We'll go in the configurations with VIOS1 here. Let these devices start, guys. So like let me explain you the scenario. Meanwhile, these devices are about to start. So what exactly we are going to do in our scenario, guys? We have like I have taken two routers. The second router I have just taken is just because for the testing purpose. Like also you don't need to go with two routers. One router is also enough. But like just for self test purpose, we'll go on the VIOS1 configurations first. So as you can see the configurations on VIOS1. So we'll write enable configure terminal. We have the interface gig01. On the gig01 interface, this is gig01, right? So we'll write the IP address as let's say 10.255.1.10 and slash 24 is the value here, no shutdown. Exit. Then I do have the next interface, which is interface gig00. On the gig00, I'll write 1.1.1 and 255.2.0.0.0, no shutdown. Exit. So this is the configurations on my VIOS1. Let's change the host name R1 and we'll go on the VIOS2. Let's write the IP only as of now on the router 2 because we don't need to do nothing much on the router 2, just some IP configurations. So we have interface gig00. We have the IP address as 1.1.1.2.255.0.0.0 0.0.0, no shutdown, etc. Now I'll open the command prompt of my machine here, the base machine command prompt, and I will try to ping it with ping 10.255.10.10. Okay, the wrong IP I have entered. It's 1.10, not 10.10. It's timed out. Yes. So guys, you can see now I'm getting the replies from the router as well. And we can also try to ping the IP. So this network adapter is having the IP address of, like, we will check that later on in the upcoming sessions. But right now, guys, see what I am going to do is on this VIOS one, all the configurations I am going to do, and the router 2 I have taken is just because you can practice with like some telnet configurations over using like taking the access of router 1 via this router 2. So we will go here in the VIOS 1 and like see guys, now you have to focus on the configurations. Let me increase the font size. So here we do have this router 2 configurations guys. Now see guys, on the router 2 I am going to configure some like users first of all. So on this router 1, the first user I'm going to create is username, let's say admin. And to this admin guys, I'm going to give the privilege as like admin privilege. The privilege I'm giving to this admin is the 15 because I'm giving the full access to the admin who is going to take care of everything. So as I have given the privilege level to the admin, now I'm going to give the password. So let's say the admin password is Priyank. So once I have given the username admin and like the privilege 15. So in that case, like, if there are some users who did something, like users can do anything. We can't trust everyone in the organization. So it's something like, we need to have one administrator account. So this is the administrator account which we have created with the full access. Also, I'm going to create two more users. So let's say username, I have user 2. Now user 2 is having some privilege level of 2 I'm gonna give, and the password to the user 2 I'm gonna give is user 2. Again, I'm gonna create one user 5, let's say, and the privilege level I'm going to give the user 5 as 5. So I have created total 3 users, guys. The first user I have created as user 2, and the second user I have created as user 5. So both of the users have their own customized privileges. So there is as such no limitations for the customization. You can go with as many configurations as you want to according to the need of your production environment. So this is mandatory because if you will not do the administrator configurations, then you can end up in like, a scenario where it will be pretty much difficult for you to configure each and everything on the devices. Now guys, what I'm going to do here is now for the user 2, I am going to assign some privilege levels. Like the user 2 will be able to access only few services, not every service. So if I'm going to give the privilege, so privilege, like see guys, these are the options where you can give the privilege. Either on BGP, on every of the configuration, you can go with the privilege configuration. So we don't need to go with all these configurations. We will simply select ABC. See guys, these are all the configurations where you can, put the privilege levels. So like EIGRP is also one of them. So you will find that we will give on this execution mode. So just to make you understand, but there are lots of things in the devices which you all know depending upon the protocols. So we'll go in the router and we will write privilege. Now where we are applying the privilege, so we are applying on the execution level. So we will write level. What is the level you are applying to? And I am giving the access to show running command, show running configuration. So this is the privilege level which I have assigned to the user 2. Then after the another privilege execution level 2, I am going to give the user 2 as show start, like show startup config he can use. So once we have given this, we can also give one more access, like he can also write the configurations like write memory. Then once it's done, you can give one more configuration like, see guys, this is something important now, configure terminal. This is what you need to understand. Now I am giving the privilege execution level 2 to the user 2 for configure terminal, that this user 2 can access configure terminal as well. Now in the configure terminal, whenever we are defining the privilege in the configure terminal, then you need to change the mode here. Now you need to define the configure level here. So once you have defined the configure level, then you have to select the level 2. And what is the user allowed to do in the configuration mode? The user is only allowed to change the host name, nothing else the user is allowed to do. So this is what you need to take care, like which mode you are executing the privilege for which user and which command set you are using. Now we will do some configurations for the user 5. So for user 5, like we will not go with execution. Now we will go with some configurations like let's say privilege, configure level. This is for the level 5 and here the user is allowed to use IP route. Again, we have the configure level. Let's say the user is allowed to use the interface command as well. Then we will go on the interface. Now I am defining the interface privileges. So I will write privilege interface. So once I have given the privilege interface, then I will define the level. That level is 5. And once it's done, the user is allowed to give the IP address as well. Once this is done, the user is also allowed to shut down the interface on the interface level. Make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Then lastly, we will define some, let's say, configure level again. So let's say privilege level configure 5 we will define. So let's say the user wants to do some routing configuration. So you all know that when we configure the routing information, like the routing protocol, so we always route the command like router and whatever the name of the protocol, right? So I am giving the configuration level to the router as well as like the router. Once the user has got the access to the router command, then the user will definitely go through with the advertisements of the network. So we need to give this access as well. That user is allowed to advertise the networks inside the devices. So, okay, what it is showing privilege. Okay, see guys, here now one thing I have done is now here guys, what I have done is privilege configure level for network. So now the network command is run where the privilege will be now the router and the level 5 and then we will advertise the network. So this is what we need to configure inside the devices. So once this is clear to everyone, now we will go with some AAA configurations in the device. So we'll write AAA new model. Then we will define the authentication list again, AAA authentication. And let's say the authentication login we will define and then we can create one CCIE list here. And then we will run the command local. So once this is done here, then we will define the AAA authorization as well. AAA authorization and where we have applied the authorization on the execution levels. So we will define the CCIE and then we will define the list of authentication as local here. So once this is done, guys, then we will just configure, let's say some, line VTY configuration. So we can say line VTY 0 to 4 users. I'm giving the access. Now we need to define the login authorization authentication. Sorry. So in the login authentication, the list is CCIE. Now I need to define the authorization as well. So we'll define the authorization execution CCIE. So once this is done, transport input all. Now exit. Now I'm going to configure some routing here. So let's say router EHERP 100 and no auto summary. Network I have is 10.0. Not 10, sorry, I have only 1.0.0. Exit. Now on the router 2 also I'm just gonna put these configurations like router EHERP, no auto summary and all. We'll go on the VIOS 2 here. And you will see that router EHERP 100, no auto summary. Network we have is 1.0.0.0. Except wait, so dual agency is formed here. Now guys, see, I'm not going to use router 2 in any of the case, like what I just wanted to show you. So we'll go on the base machine first. So I will open my putting from the desktop. I'll access 1.1.1. machine and using the telnet using port number 23 open. So let's see. All right, let's try one more time with the next IP we have 10.255.1.10 and telnet we are gonna use. Yes, so now we got the access to the device here, guys. See, this is the putty like which I have access from my base machine. Now it is asking me for the usernames, and the two usernames we created, let's say user one was there and user one was the password to the user one. So let's wait. Authentication failed. Let me check what was the username, I guess, which I have configured on the device.
User 2 and 5, sir.
User 2 and 5, yes, user 2 and user 2. So we'll write user 2 here and user 2 is the password. So now we got the access here. See guys, now this user 2 was defined for like, your basic configuration. So if you will go in the configure terminal, you are allowed to go in the configure terminal. See, you can change the host name as well. So you can say, let's say you change the host name to router 1 from R1. So you're allowed to change. But if you will select any interface, let's say gig01, see what it is showing to you. Invalid input detected. That you don't have the privilege access to get the, for this particular router to take the access on the interface mode. But other thing which I will show you now, we'll go, this is the base machine which you can see. If we'll go here in the VIOS 2, so we'll take the telnet access from VIOS 2 of VIOS 1. So let's say telnet 1.1.1.1. Username, let's say user 5 was there and user 5 is the access. So we got the information here. Now see configure terminal. If I will write interface gig 0/0, so you got the access C. So this is how the privilege access commands and privilege authorization works inside the real production environments. And this is how, like, you don't need to understand anything. What the basic and important thing you need to understand in the privilege levels is this, that once you need to create the user privilege admin as well. And apart from that, whenever you are defining the policies, you need to have an idea like where which privilege level will work. See, here if I applied the privilege on the interface, like here I selected the configuration first and then the privilege will be in the interface. Then on the interface, we know that either the user will be able to assign the IP address or the user will able to shut down the IP address. So that depends upon the configurations, and these things needs, like a very good kind of theoretical documentation before applying on the real production environment. So this is just the configuration part for the authorization, guys, and that is all from your AAA. Now your queries you can raise. Now also see, like, one more thing I'll show you on the VIOS 2. So if you'll run the command show privilege, so you can see the privilege level you are getting is 5 for the user 5, right, on the VIOS 2. But from the putty, if you will take the configurations here, so you'll run the command show privilege. So you can see the privilege level you are getting is 2, because for the user 2 we have defined the privilege level is 2 as well only. So this is how the privilege customization of the privileges works like, but the default is 1 in the 15, 1 is for the user mode and 15 is for the rest of the configuration switches on the privilege mode already. Like, so these are default and these are some customized authorizations.
मीन सर प्रिविलेज के 1 से 15 तक मैं कुछ भी किसी को कुछ भी एक्सेस दे सकता हूँ, राइट?
देखो 1 से 15 में आप किसी को कुछ भी दे सकते हो, सिर्फ 2 से लेकर 14 तक यू आर नॉट अलाउड टू गिव 1 एंड 15, क्योंकि 1 तो आपका बाय डिफॉल्ट हमेशा होगा ही आपके उस वाले राउट लाइक ऑन द यूजर मोड, एंड आपका 15 हमेशा होगा प्रिविलेज मोड पे। जैसे अभी मैं VIOS 1 पे चलता हूँ जहाँ पे हमने कॉन्फ़िगरेशंस किए हैं। अब यहाँ पे आप रन करोगे, देखो शो प्रिविलेज लेवल, तो देखो यहाँ पे दिखा रहा है प्रिविलेज इज 15, क्योंकि अभी मैं डायरेक्ट राउटर में लॉग इन हुआ, आई एम नॉट लॉग्ड इन विद एनी यूजर्स हियर, राइट।
यस यस।
और जब मैंने आपको यहाँ राउटर 2 पे मैंने वेरीफाई कराया, तो यू कैन सी हमने यूजर लॉगिन किया टेलनेट एक्सेस लेके वाया द यूजर 5, सो वेयर वी हैव एग्जीक्यूटेड द कस्टमाइज्ड लेवल ऑफ प्रिविलेज व्हिच इज द लेवल 5. So that is how these configurations works inside the production environments. But see, all these things sounds pretty easy, sounds pretty clear, but whenever we are going with this privilege levels, a good theoretical documentation needs to be created and implemented first before applying in the production environment, because configurations can be pretty much pathetic if you just forgot any terms here. Even though yesterday, like, I was doing the same lab in the batch of, like, Manish and all, they are from the weekend batch. So like we were performing the lab and there was some command misconfiguration, so we were just getting the error. So I troubleshooted that, and like here we do have the scenario. So this is like we need a better documentation for these privilege and configurations level. But the thing is, if you have a good knowledge like where which command runs, then you will be easily able to do this. Like see, if you will select the command router rip, so in the router rip you will advertise the network only. So you need to give the router the network command as well in the configuration level. So see, here I did what? Once I written the privilege configure level 5 router, like for example, I want to advertise the router rep. So then I also need to advertise the network, but the network will not be advertised in the configuration terminal. The network will be advertised inside the config router. Like when I advertise the rep routing, see, the network was advertised where? In the configurational router part. It was not advertised in the configure terminal. So like see, router AIGRP was advertised in the global configuration, but network was advertised in config router configuration. So this is the thing which you need to understand while doing the authorization.
That server we created, na different server. So what is the main role of that server? Same thing we can do in router as well.
Like you are talking about the TACACS server.
Yes, sir.
See, like whenever we are, you are configuring some users in the production environment. So we can say like these TACACS servers, or these are some like, these are some separate, servers which deals with authentication and authorization. So all these things which we are doing right now on the devices, so they can be done on these servers as well according to the users. Like all these users are stored on these separate servers. Like for example, in a very large scale organization, it's not even recommended that like they should store all the users in the router, but it's not like a point to be mentioned, or like it's not even mandatory. But still, as per the concept, Cisco introduced something so that you can store your all users on, like for example, for large scale organizations, those users can stored on a separate dedicated, like only the admin will be there in the local database of the router. So this is why we do need these TACACS servers separately to store the user informations. And these are also considered as, Cisco ACS servers, like, access control systems, where we use these TACACS and Radius servers.
Okay,
So we
that
can,
the cast server, sir, is configured by network admin or that Wintel or any different thing.
no, that too is configured by the network team as well, because see, the TACACS server is something which is going to give you a centralized authentication for the users to like who want to gain the access of the network. So that will be the responsibility of the network administrator only. Like for example, let's say you and Sarvesh joined the like technical team, and like for example, like I'm the manager there. So I told you like Dinesh, like as you are the head of the network, so you need to define like apart from every other user, like Sarvesh and you are only going to take the access. So you can like just create your own databases on the TACACS servers.
Okay, the cast server means it's a window type of server or any other
No,
software
that's
will.
a separate dedicated hardware, Dinesh. Like when we talk about the TACACS servers, like they all the AAA packets, like whenever we are using the AAA concepts, and that only we do use the TACACS and Radius. So all the packets are exchanged like between using the TACACS. So like the user is getting some authentication from the TACACS server. So all that data is being also encrypted in that case. But when the data is locally stored in the database of your router, so it's not encrypted by default.
No, sir, how this the cast server looks like is type of that database server where we use that different iOS, or is type of Windows server where we use Windows or any Linux. Which operating system we use in this the cast server?
So it is basically all about like, and I have basic no idea on that, but what I know is like, it's something like on like it was also stored like, on the basis of Linux only. Like the CLI of that particular TACACS is also something dependent on the Linux only.
Okay, only CLI. Do we have a GUI?
Yes, GUI is also there. Like it's not like only CLI is there. GUI is also there.
Okay, only the cast server used for to store the data means for the accounting you discuss now for
Like
accounting.
for authorizing, like for authentication.
Authentication and for accounting.
अकाउंटिंग के लिए हमारे पास डिफरेंट प्रोटोकॉल्स है लाइक वी डू हैव सर्वर syslog servers and all.
Okay. But the same thing router in router we can do na authorization.
हाँ, yes we can do in the routers as well, but देखो concept है तो we have to discuss, और उसी के according like Cisco ने भी कुछ देखा होगा like कुछ encryption security measures को रखते हुए, that is why they introduced something new, so that is the thing.
ओके, वही जो मेन डिफरेंस थोड़ा क्लियर नहीं हो रहा सर कि राउटर में और इसमें क्या ज्यादा डिफरेंस है कि हम इसको यूज कर रहे हैं, वही चीज
देखो
हम राउटर में कर रहे हैं उसमें भी वही किया।
आप टकास के ऊपर आपको ऑथेंटिकेशन बेटर मिलता है एज कम्पेयर टू राउटर, एक पॉइंट तो ये आप नोट करो,
मींस मोर
एंड
सिक्योर।
it's more secure as compared to the local database of the router.
ओके,
And whatever the packets you are exchanging through the this ACS server, like the TACACS server, so will always be encrypted. And also we can say it will give you some separate authentication. Like, you don't need to go on the router. Like for example, let's say if any user is trying to get the access of like all the users of your network, so that like there is a separate database stored for your users, so we can say that is something giving you a kind of security as well, right? And
okay.
like one of my colleague is working in FortiGate as well, he also told me that they are even using TechAS Plus, and like they are we can say production environment, and this is something which give you some good authorization access, and all these things are there.
Okay. And if we talk about radius, then configuration will be same for radius and cast plus in server.
Yes, instead of writing the TACACS plus command, we write the
Okay.
radius on. Like, see, when you will go with the security concept, na Dinesh, like you will find AAA more in detail. Like there are some rule-based authorizations accordingly, and there is some accounting flow. In that accounting flow, you will find that how the the data travels between the client and the server, and so many things are there. Like why it only encrypts the password. So all these things are basically just the part of your security. But for your information, we can say that AAA authentication login TACACS. Dinesh, you dropped something.
Yes, I have pasted some commands which I have. I'd say you can say that old configuration which I was
Okay.
trying. Yeah.
Are these commands you have? Let me paste it in the notepad, will be clear then. Okay, so you have authentication logged in first, then you have configured authentication on console none, enable default none, execution to cast locally. Accounting commands default starts off, TACACS plus TACACS off. So these are configured on some device, Dinesh, like with the commands you have
Yes,
pasted here.
it was configured in device that which I was when I was in previous project.
Okay, and the router itself or in the TACACS server? It would be in the
No,
router, I
that
guess.
configured in router only, sir. That
Yes, yes,
router
yes. Got it.
it's a Cisco router.
Yes, got it.
I
See,
want to
like,
know some brief, not, no, I don't want to go in detail, only some brief that commands.
okay, see, the first command you have enabled the TACACS, right? By creating a group of the users. The second command you have disabled the authentication for like console, enabled it for default only. The fourth command is saying authorization you have enabled for execution default group. So there was a group, I guess, which was created locally in the TACACS server for like all the users, which was for execution default. Then we have this AAA authorization command 15 default group TACACS plus if authenticated local. And like Dinesh, I need to go through with the last 4 or 5 commands, and I'll check and then let you know on these 4 commands.
Okay, sir.
Yes. So these were
That,
configured in Cisco devices, na? Right?
yes, it is Cisco device. Yes, sir.
Yes.
That the second and third command none means we have denied that, na?
Yes, right. We have not used that particular scenario in the,
Oh.
like for those console and that part. And like in AAA, there are lots of things. Like if you'll go with the official documentation, you'll find that lots of things. And it's a very large and complex topic in itself only. But as of now, that is enough for your part of AAA.